Hello, thanks for watching this video. I'm Violeta Cabello. I'm a researcher at the Autonomous University of Barcelona, and today I'm sharing some insights from a case study we've been developing in the last 2 years in the Canary Islands as part of the project MAGIC. I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully you will be watching my slides and my little flash somewhere on the corner from now on. So our research focused on analyzing the role of alternative water resources, namely desalination and wastewater reclamation, for irrigation purposes in the Canary Islands. This was a collaboration between the local Institute for Technology of the Canaries, the Autonomous University of Barcelona, and the Joint Research Center in ISPRA. Three partners from the project MAGIC, which is a Horizon 2020 that is now developing a few of these EU Learn sessions with the results we have obtained. So MAGIC is the acronym for Moving Towards Adaptive Governance in Complexity. It's now an informing Nexus security. So the project focused on the Nexus and this idea of interconnections with water, food, and energy that for us represented complex and uncertain problems that require new ways of governing, new ways of doing science. The main project goals were like innovating in the process of science for governance, while creating dialogues across Nexus domains through a very active stakeholder engagement, and assessing Nexus relevant policies and innovations in Europe. For that, MAGIC proposed this approach named quantitative storytelling that in a nutshell is a mixed method narrative inquiry. It combines quantitative and qualitative methods and with participatory approaches, and it seeks deliberation and social learning with relevant actors. So we applied this approach to the assessment of an innovation in our case, which is alternative water resources, and innovation in water and agricultural governance in the arid context of the Canaries. So a little bit of background. The Canary Islands have developed in the past decades a very intensive agricultural activity, mostly for exportation to European countries, and it also has expanded their touristic activities in an arid context, what obviously brought important precious overwater resources. And in some islands, they have been experiencing serious problems of aquifer degradation, both in quantity and in quality. And in addition, the Canaries has a very particular situation of private water ownership that continues nowadays. Is a sort of exception in Europe, where water is public, okay? But this is a very important contextual factor that somehow prompted the development of alternative water resources decades ago, because water was quite expensive. Freshwater resources were quite expensive in these islands. So we chose to study areas in two different islands, sorry. One in Gran Canaria, here in red, where the agricultural activity is focused both on exportation, mostly on exportation, but it also has production for local markets. And they had 20 years of experience in the use of desalination and reclaimed water in combination in different mixes with groundwater. On the other hand, the second study area in Tenerife, in the north of Tenerife, is mostly focused on exportations, and although it also have some self-subsistence farms, and the use of alternative water resources is new. So they were just starting a reclamation project, and the water resources they were using was mostly groundwater. So for these two study areas, we posed this research question: what is the role in light of different changes like climate change and other trade and food market changes internationally. Oops. So our methodology combined followed this quantitative storytelling process, and we started by interviewing 27 actors across knowledge nexus domains from agricultural, water, and energy domains. We had both experts and lay knowledge, although we had more experts than local people. And we, through the coding of the interviews, we analyzed narratives that for us mean stories about causality. So what are the problems? What are the solutions to the problems? How these solutions be developed? And so on. And we also focus on analyzing uncertainties and contradictions. So how different people perceive the problems, where were the contradictions in how they handle the information, and associated uncertainties. And we also analyze who was talking, so who were the different actors and what was the relationship between them. After that, we moved to the quantitative analysis of nexus interconnections. In our case, that meant to analyze how water was used, by what type of farming systems, and under what energy cost. We applied the multi-scale integrated analysis of social and ecological metabolism. And that is, MUSIASM is the acronym. This is the quantitative methodology across all MAGIC case studies. To feed this method, we conducted field surveys in farms in both study areas, and where we inquire farmers about the different inputs to the production, the type of technologies they were using, what type of water resources, how they were handling them, yields, markets, like a great variety of variables. And we also consulted secondary data sources like river basin management plans or other policy documents for additional information. So finally, a big part of the quantitative storytelling approach is the idea of linking quantitative and qualitative information. So we used the quantitative database that we had to try and generate information that was pertinent, that was relevant to the narratives that we had identified. That meant in some cases to check statements from the different actors with our data and see whether they were true or whether our data was somehow contradicting their opinions or perceptions. Sometimes it was only clarifying uncertainty, things that were not known by actors, like what is the actual energy cost of producing desalination. So different actors had different opinions and used different figures about that. So it was a way of bringing data that could be useful for later deliberation. And also when we had like narratives about the future, about expectations, if we had data, we were trying to quantify those scenarios so that we could also generate useful information. All that to open dialogue with different actors in 2 workshops, one in each island, where we did field visits. So we visited the agricultural areas and we developed an exercise of assessment of the narratives under different scenarios, and we were also trying to generate like new narratives. So what's the way forward? How what actions do we need to move to the desired futures, and who should be involved in that? So all that was our methodology, and I will now try to summarize the main results that we have obtained, although we are still working on that. So first we were analyzing the narratives, as I just explained. So about this idea, about this question about why developing agricultural water resources in the Canaries, what's the role? So the answers for this, we obtained them mostly from the Gran Canaria case, where they had experience with the use of these resources. What we found was a strong convergence. So most actors agreed on the importance of developing these technologies, these resources, for different reasons. So some of them were emphasizing the idea of aquifer degradation, and some others were emphasizing more the idea of providing security to farmers in terms of water availability, water quality, and price. This was very important, and I will later explain. So these type of arguments were usually presented also in the form of win-win statements. So many people believe that they serve for both purposes. Although there were others raising issues, challenges, impacts derived from the use of these resources, and many expectations placed on keep on innovating, keep on developing technologies to address those challenges. Okay, I will come back to this. We did also about the quantitative results. I don't have the time to go through that, but we analyzed the water use patterns, and we observed in the Gran Canaria case that alternative water resources are used by very different type of farming systems. So it's not only large farms devoted to exportation that are using desalination and wastewater reclamation, but also small farming systems are starting to use them, and these farming systems are producing more diverse crops, especially for local markets. So it's like their use is already very important, and is equal almost 50-50 to fresh water resources, to groundwater. So how was that possible in Gran Canaria as compared to other European regions, Southern European regions, where agriculture has not incorporated these resources? So there are several contextual factors that made the use of these resources viable in the Canaries. First and foremost, the idea of competitive prices, because there is a context of private water markets where groundwater and fresh and surface water are very expensive. The alternative water resources were competitive in price, and this was possible because there was a strong public leadership in developing these technologies, and also because they regulated the prices. So you can, like the different desalination plants cannot set up their own price. There's a common price, and it's partially subsidized. The Canadian government also has a very strong support to farmers in incorporating the new resources and in the technicalities involved in that. And also in Gran Canaria, alternative water resources have effectively contributed to stabilize aquifers. This is still uncertain in Tenerife, because even though we found that the reclamation is needed for conserving groundwater resources, there is not there are not effective mechanisms to make the relationship explicit, you could say, in water management plans. We also observed emerging narratives, and in our workshop, what we observed is that most people were more interested in talking about the future of agriculture than to the future of water. So water is not an issue for farmers anymore, but how to make their farm profitable and sustainable in the long run is. So there was this narrative about food sovereignty, about relocalizing food production and consumption in the islands as a possibility for the future. The farmers prefer reclaimed water because it's cheaper than desalination. And also there was a strong claim from rural areas, which are located high in the mountain in these islands, for accessing alternative water resources that at the moment are mostly used in the coast. And finally, there were a lot of expectations on the role of renewable energies to lower the price in the future, so that these resources can be more accessible to rural areas, to small farms, and so on. However, the role of these technologies is still very uncertain, so there is not much evidence on the possibility of lowering desalination price by connecting it to a solar panel or to renewable wind. There are some pilots that have worked, but scaling up that innovation still requires further research and test. Finally, some like the challenges one I just described is the idea, the role of the future role of renewable energies in lowering prices. I think another challenge is this change of perception from water scarcity to water abundance. So water is not a limiting factor, and this may reinforce unsustainable trends, and this is like a warning. And maybe the most important challenge is the unequal access to alternative water resources. So depending on where you are and whether you can pay for them or not, and whether you can access the infrastructure, you are not in the same position to use these resources. Finally, we also observe there are some issues with the quality of alternative water resources. Desalination, it has been shown, desalinated water to create important impacts on soil, and this issue has to be taken further in research, because in the long run, soils are losing quality because of the use of desalinated water, because of the you could say inadequate salt balance of this water. And on the other hand, with reclamation, there come a lot of issues of circularity and what happens with the water, and with what urban people throw to the water, and how to remove emergent contaminants, and so on. So the management of reclaimed water for agriculture is very technical and requires support, requires training. Uh, with regards to the links with European policies, we think that there is, so alternative water resources are not considered as part of, for instance, the Water Framework Directive. They don't have a dedicated regulatory framework in European policies that, for instance, addresses the energy dependencies or the interlinkages with agricultural production. So this is an issue for discussion in the session that we will have in the upcoming weeks. One idea is that these resources could be explicitly included, these innovations, as instruments for pursuing environmental objectives of the Water Framework Directive, maybe also from in the Common Agricultural Policy. And another point for discussion is that this idea of prices and how to cover how to deal with this unequal situation, and what happens with the small farming systems, and who is going to pay for that if we actually want everybody to have an equal possibility of accessing these resources. This might be against the cost recovery principle of the Water Framework Directive, and actually in the Canary Islands, the government is subsidizing these resources, which is against this principle. And to end up, just to say that the results from one of these case studies, in the one in Tenerife, have been included in the application of the new water reuse regulation that is now starting to apply the Spanish government, and they have funded a new project in this area as a pilot on how to assess risk associated to the use of reclamation water for irrigation and how to plan for reducing those risks. So we have new research going on to go more in depth on key challenges. So as conclusions, I think that our research found and actually contributed to through the process of engagement that we developed social acceptance of alternative water resources as means to deal with decreasing freshwater sources, while also providing security to farmers. This is not exempt of challenges, and most of the expectations lie on how to expand the access for a variety of farming systems, and what is the role of renewable energy technologies, and how we to keep on innovating and to make this sort of expectations true. And the idea of the regulation of prices, that was a fundamental success factor for the viability of alternative water resources in the Canary. How can this be exported to other European regions in the same situation? And maybe a higher eco of these resources within European policies could help. So thank you for listening. This was all. There is plenty of information in a MAGIC website. There is one section in the website about this case study where you can find the deliverable reports, papers, policy briefs. So there it is for the moment, and we'll see you online. All the people involved in this case study will be online in the sessions next weeks. Thank you so much, and goodbye.